Heavenly Stories.
The city of Jericho was buzzing with noise. Merchants shouted out their prices, donkeys carried heavy loads through the narrow streets, and the warm desert wind stirred the dust beneath people's sandals. Yet in the middle of the crowd, one man stood out, not because people admired him, but because they despised him. His name was Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was not a poor man, in fact, he was very rich. He had everything money could buy: fine clothes, a comfortable home, and enough silver coins to make his neighbors jealous. But instead of admiration, he received glares, whispers, and even curses. Why? Because Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. In Roman-occupied Judea, tax collectors were hated. They worked for the foreign empire that ruled over the Jewish people, and most of them became wealthy by cheating their fellow citizens. Zacchaeus was no exception. He charged more than required, pocketed the difference, and lived comfortably while others struggled to feed their families. To the people of Jericho, he was not only a thief but also a traitor, someone who sided with Rome instead of his own people. Children were told not to play near him. Honest men avoided his path. The very mention of his name could make a crowd grumble in disgust. Yet Zacchaeus, though surrounded by wealth, felt an emptiness he could not ignore. His heart carried the weight of guilt, even if he tried to hide it behind luxury. One day, news spread like wildfire through the city: Jesus of Nazareth was passing through Jericho. People rushed to the streets to see him, the teacher who healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, and even raised the dead. His reputation had reached every corner of the land, and many believed he might be the promised Messiah. Zacchaeus' curiosity was stirred. Something inside him longed to see this man everyone was talking about. Was Jesus different from the teachers who condemned him? Could he look at a tax collector with anything other than scorn? Though Zacchaeus couldn't explain why, he felt an urgent need to catch a glimpse of him. But there was a problem: Zacchaeus was short. In a crowd, he couldn't see over the taller men who lined the streets. Each time he tried to push his way forward, people elbowed him back, muttering under their breath, "Out of the way, thief! You don't belong here." Their hatred was sharp, and their words cut deep. Still, Zacchaeus would not give up. Driven by a strange mix of desperation and hope, he ran ahead of the crowd. His sandals slapped against the dirt as he searched for a better spot. That's when he saw it, a tall sycamore fig tree growing by the roadside. Without hesitation, Zacchaeus climbed up its branches, his fine robe snagging slightly against the bark. From there, he could finally see the road where Jesus would pass. As he clung to the branches, his heart pounded. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. Perhaps just a passing glance at the famous teacher. Perhaps a word or two carried by the wind. Yet something inside told him that this moment might change everything. The crowd grew louder. Jesus was approaching. And for the first time in years, Zacchaeus felt like a child again, full of anticipation, hope, and fear all at once. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to be turned upside down. The sound of the crowd swelled like a wave as Jesus drew nearer. People pressed in from all sides, eager to catch a glimpse of the man whose words carried power and whose touch brought healing. Mothers lifted their children onto their shoulders, old men leaned on their staffs, and the poor stretched out their hands, hoping for a miracle. Zacchaeus, perched in the sycamore tree, leaned forward, gripping the rough bark. His eyes scanned the approaching figure. There he was, Jesus of Nazareth. He didn't look like a wealthy king or a mighty warrior. Instead, he appeared simple, yet his presence carried an authority that was undeniable. The people around him seemed drawn to him as if his very being radiated hope. Then something extraordinary happened. As Jesus reached the spot beneath the tree, he stopped. The crowd quieted, puzzled by his sudden pause. Jesus lifted his eyes, and his gaze locked onto Zacchaeus. For a moment, it felt as if time stood still. Zacchaeus' breath caught in his throat. Out of hundreds of faces in Jericho, Jesus was looking directly at him. The people followed his gaze and gasped. "It's Zacchaeus!" Someone hissed. "Why is he stopping for that sinner?" Another man muttered, "Surely he'll condemn him. He deserves it." But Jesus' words stunned everyone. "Zacchaeus," he called, his voice both firm and full of warmth, "come down at once. I must stay at your house today." Zacchaeus nearly lost his grip on the branch. His name, spoken by Jesus himself. Not in anger. Not in judgment. But with an invitation. His heart raced as he scrambled down from the tree, his robe brushing against the leaves. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from overwhelming joy. The crowd erupted in whispers and protests. What? Stay at his house? Does Jesus know who this man is? He's a cheat, a thief. Why would a holy teacher choose to eat with a man like him? Their indignation filled the air, but Zacchaeus barely heard them. For years, Zacchaeus had been rejected, despised, and excluded. Yet in one moment, Jesus did what no one else had ever done, he saw him. Not just his wealth, not his sin, not his reputation. He saw him. And instead of condemnation, he offered fellowship. Zacchaeus' heart burned with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. As he walked beside Jesus, leading him toward his home, he felt the weight of shame begin to lift. The teacher who healed lepers and gave sight to the blind was now willing to sit at his table. The crowd trailed behind, still grumbling. To them, this scene made no sense. A respected rabbi dining with a notorious sinner? It was scandalous. Yet to Zacchaeus, it was the beginning of something he could hardly comprehend. As they entered his home, the cool shade of the stone walls offered relief from the heat outside. Servants hurried to prepare a meal, their eyes wide with disbelief at their guest. Zacchaeus could hardly sit still. He watched Jesus with awe, noticing how every gesture and word carried kindness and authority. Inside, the house that had once felt empty despite its riches now seemed alive. The presence of Jesus filled it with light, and Zacchaeus felt as though his soul was being stirred awake. He didn't yet know what would happen next, but deep inside, he sensed that his life was already changing. For the first time, Zacchaeus wondered if true wealth wasn't counted in silver or gold but in something far greater, something this teacher had come to give. The dining room of Zacchaeus' house glowed with the light of oil lamps. Platters of bread, figs, and roasted meat covered the table, but Zacchaeus barely noticed the food. His eyes kept returning to Jesus, who sat at the place of honor. The teacher's calm presence seemed to fill every corner of the room. Outside, the voices of the crowd still echoed through the streets. Many refused to leave, their complaints sharp and bitter. How could he go to be the guest of a sinner? If this man were truly from God, he would not eat with someone like Zacchaeus. Those words reached Zacchaeus' ears. He knew the accusations were true. He was a sinner. His wealth had been built on dishonesty, and countless families had suffered because of his greed. For years, he had silenced his conscience with excuses, telling himself everyone cheated, everyone wanted more. But now, sitting across from Jesus, those excuses crumbled like dust. Jesus didn't lecture him. He didn't point a finger or demand repayment. Instead, his silence was filled with mercy, and his eyes, gentle yet piercing, looked into Zacchaeus' soul. It was as though Jesus saw every wrong he had ever committed, yet still offered him love instead of rejection. Zacchaeus' heart raced. He could no longer hide. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on him, but alongside it came something unexpected, a burning desire to change. He thought of the poor widows he had cheated, the children who had gone hungry because of his greed, the neighbors who had cursed his name. For the first time, he felt not only shame but also compassion. He stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. The room fell silent. His servants froze, their hands still holding trays. Even the murmurs from outside seemed to fade as Zacchaeus' trembling voice filled the space. "Look, Lord," he said, addressing Jesus with a mixture of reverence and desperation. "Here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Gasps echoed through the house. His servants exchanged bewildered glances. Half of his wealth, given away. 4-fold repayment. This was no small gesture. It was radical, unheard of. Zacchaeus was not simply apologizing, he was pledging to rebuild his life on honesty and generosity. But Zacchaeus wasn't calculating profits and losses anymore. His heart had shifted. The money that once defined him now felt meaningless compared to the freedom he longed for. His words poured out not as a performance but as the cry of a man desperate to be made new. Jesus' face lit up with joy. His voice, steady and strong, declared, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man, too, is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Those words struck Zacchaeus like a river of mercy. Salvation. Acceptance. Belonging. For so long, he had been treated as an outcast, a traitor, a sinner beyond redemption. But now, before the eyes of the teacher, he was called a son of Abraham, a true member of God's people. Tears welled in his eyes. He felt as though chains had been broken, chains he had carried for years without realizing their weight. He was free, not because of his wealth, but because of the mercy of Jesus. In that moment, Zacchaeus' house was no longer just a place of luxury, it became a sanctuary of grace. The man who had been known as the most despised in Jericho was now a living testimony of God's power to transform a heart. The crowd outside could keep murmuring, but Zacchaeus didn't care anymore. His life had been changed forever, and nothing would ever be the same again. Outside Zacchaeus' home, the crowd stirred restlessly. Oil lamps flickered in the evening breeze, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. People had lingered for hours, unwilling to leave, their curiosity tangled with disbelief and frustration. When word spread that Zacchaeus had promised to give away half his wealth and repay the cheated 4 times over, reactions exploded like sparks in dry grass. Some scoffed. "It's a show. He's only saying that because Jesus is here. Once the teacher leaves, he'll go back to his tricks." Others crossed their arms, suspicious yet uncertain. "Even if he means it, it doesn't erase years of theft. Families starved while he grew rich. Can a single moment undo all that?" But a few, quieter voices whispered with wonder. "What if it's true? What if this man really has changed? Could it be that the power of this Jesus reaches even tax collectors?" The debate rolled through the crowd, exposing hearts. Some could not accept the idea that a man like Zacchaeus could ever be forgiven. To them, grace felt unfair. Others, weary of bitterness, longed to believe that redemption was possible, even for someone so deeply flawed. Inside the house, Jesus' words still echoed, "The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Those words traveled far beyond Zacchaeus' walls. They were not only for him but for everyone listening. They carried a truth that unsettled the proud but gave hope to the broken. For centuries, many had thought God's love was reserved for the righteous, the pure, the outwardly holy. Yet here was Jesus, demonstrating something radical: no one was too far gone. No sin was too great. Even a man despised by his entire city could become a child of God. Among the onlookers stood a poor widow, her face lined with years of hardship. She remembered the day Zacchaeus' men had taken the last of her olive oil for taxes. Anger had burned in her heart for years. But hearing of his pledge to repay 4-fold, she felt a strange stirring inside. Could she let go of her hatred? Could she believe in a new Zacchaeus? Nearby, a group of young men who had spat at Zacchaeus earlier in the day now exchanged uncertain glances. They had mocked him as a traitor, yet Jesus had honored him with a visit. If the teacher valued Zacchaeus, perhaps their judgments weren't as final as they had thought. The truth was clear: Zacchaeus' transformation wasn't just about him, it was a message for the entire city. If grace could reach him, it could reach anyone. Still, not all hearts were ready to accept it. Some stormed off into the night, muttering that Jesus couldn't possibly be from God if he spent time with sinners. Others lingered, caught between skepticism and awe, wrestling with their own need for mercy. Inside, Zacchaeus felt the tension of the city pressing in, but he no longer feared their judgment. He knew the truth, his heart had been changed. His wealth no longer defined him. His reputation no longer chained him. What mattered now was following the teacher who had seen him, called him, and given him a second chance. For Zacchaeus, the grumbling of the crowd was just noise compared to the joy of salvation echoing in his soul. That night in Jericho, a seed was planted, one that would challenge the city to rethink what it meant to belong to God's family. And at the center of it all stood a man once despised, now transformed by the love of Christ. The story of Zacchaeus did not end the night Jesus stayed in his home. In the days and weeks that followed, Jericho buzzed with stories of what had taken place. Some couldn't stop talking about it, others tried to dismiss it. But no one could ignore it. Word spread quickly that Zacchaeus was actually following through on his promise. People whispered of widows receiving unexpected gifts of coins, of men who had been cheated years ago now being repaid far more than what was taken. Some shook their heads in disbelief, but others were deeply moved. Repentance had taken root in Zacchaeus' life. It wasn't just a moment of emotion, it was action. True repentance, as Jesus had shown through Zacchaeus, wasn't about empty words or shallow apologies. It was about transformation. It meant turning away from sin and walking in a new direction. The people of Jericho began to see a new man emerge. Where once Zacchaeus had walked proudly in fine robes, ignoring the needs of others, now he walked humbly, his eyes attentive to the poor and the broken. Where once he had hoarded wealth, now he gave it away freely. His life became a testimony of the mercy he had received. For those who watched closely, it was clear, this was the power of God at work. No man could change so completely on his own. Only an encounter with Jesus could take a heart of stone and make it beat with compassion. But Zacchaeus' story was not just about personal change, it carried lessons for everyone. First, it revealed the heart of Jesus. He did not come to honor the proud or reward the self-righteous. He came for the lost, the broken, the outcasts. By choosing Zacchaeus, Jesus showed that no one was beyond his reach. The grace of God was wider, deeper, and more powerful than human prejudice. Second, it showed that repentance is more than regret. Many people feel sorry for their mistakes, but few take steps to make things right. Zacchaeus didn't just say he was sorry, he acted. He gave away wealth, restored what he had stolen, and lived differently. His actions proved that his heart was truly changed. Third, it taught a lesson about generosity. Money had once been Zacchaeus' master. He lived for it, lied for it, and sacrificed relationships for it. But once he encountered Jesus, money lost its grip on him. Instead of clinging to it, he used it to bless others. His hands, once greedy, became open. His wealth, once selfish, became a tool for good. Through Zacchaeus, people learned that generosity is not measured by how much one gives, but by the heart behind the gift. It is the overflow of a heart transformed by grace. In the synagogue, some of the teachers debated what had happened. "Is this not dangerous?" one asked. "If sinners can be welcomed so easily, will they not take advantage of grace?" Another replied thoughtfully, "But is it not written that God desires mercy, not sacrifice?" Perhaps we are seeing the fulfillment of his promises. Among the ordinary people, the story sparked hope. If Zacchaeus could be forgiven, then maybe they could too. If God's mercy could reach a man like him, then surely no one was beyond redemption. Zacchaeus himself never forgot that day. Each time he saw a poor child smile with food in hand, each time he returned money to a family he had wronged, he remembered the words of Jesus, "The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." His life had become proof of those words. And for generations to come, his story would remind others of a powerful truth: no heart is too hard, no past too dark, no sin too great for the transforming love of Christ. The story of Zacchaeus did not fade with time. Long after Jesus left Jericho, the memory of what happened remained etched into the city's heart. Children who once laughed at the short, greedy tax collector now pointed to him with curiosity and respect. Families who had once cursed his name now spoke of him with gratitude, remembering the day he knocked on their doors with generous repayment and a humble apology. The transformation of Zacchaeus became a living parable. In a world where wealth and power often hardened men's hearts, his life testified that grace could shatter chains stronger than iron. He had been enslaved to greed, but Jesus freed him. He had been despised and rejected, but Jesus restored his dignity. He had been lost, but now he was found. What struck people most was not only his repentance but his consistency. Many thought his generosity would last only a season, a burst of guilt soon forgotten. But months passed, then years, and Zacchaeus remained faithful. His home became a place of welcome, his wealth a channel for good. He lived as a man who understood that everything he had belonged to God. For the city of Jericho, his story became a reminder that God's love was not limited to the righteous or the religious. It reached into the darkest corners, touching even those considered beyond hope. For the disciples who walked with Jesus, Zacchaeus' transformation was another living proof of the mission their teacher had declared: to seek and to save the lost. Generations later, when the story was told and retold in synagogues, homes, and gatherings of believers, people would pause and smile at the mention of his name. Zacchaeus, the tax collector who climbed a tree to see Jesus. Zacchaeus, the man who gave away half his wealth. Zacchaeus, the sinner who became a son of Abraham. The lessons of his life echoed far beyond Jericho. That no one is too far gone for God's mercy. That true repentance is seen in action, not just words. That generosity flows naturally from a heart transformed by grace. Zacchaeus' encounter with Jesus was brief, just a moment in time, but its impact stretched across centuries. It showed the world that a single meeting with Christ could rewrite a life story. And so, the legacy of Zacchaeus endures, reminding all who hear it that the same Jesus who stopped under the sycamore tree still seeks the lost today. His invitation remains the same: to come down from whatever tree we've climbed, to welcome him in, and to discover the joy of a changed heart. For Zacchaeus, that day in Jericho was the day everything changed. And for countless others, his story continues to whisper hope: if grace could find him, it can find anyone.